UTV.
The School of Inspired Leadership hosted the Inspired Leadership Conference, which brought together thought leaders to exchange ideas and explore opportunities to address the nation's challenges.
Our collective ability to improve the world around us and even to save the world on which we live. And it is not going to come by somebody imposing a rule, a requirement of everyone else. Because it will come to, so what will you gain out of this which I will not? We all are, even leaders are human beings. We cannot put too far behind. So we try, and I try to say it's not about my interest, it's about everybody else's interest. But we are animals too. In the instinct, the saving of myself may come.
The world is looking at a resurgent India, and there's an urgent need for business schools to understand and research these practices. The industry leaders share their experience on inspired leadership.
You joined us for a special discussion on leadership, and we are at the School of Inspired Leadership. And joining me now are Mr. B. Muthuraman, Mr. Peter Block, and Mr. Anil Sajdev. Thanks very much to all of you for joining us. If I can begin with you, Mr. Muthuraman, leadership in good times and leadership in bad times, are they two different things, or is leadership leadership?
I don't think they are different. You see, there are some fundamentals of leadership which holds good for all times, whether it is a good time or bad time, or whether it is 500 years ago or today or 500 years later. The fundamentals of leadership are the same. You may alter your strategies, you may alter your tactics and so on, but the fundamentals of leadership are same at all times. In fact, if you have good leadership, I think you will have less of bad times.
Mr. Block, you know, inspired leadership is something that we have been talking about, but leadership has different connotations. Some people say that there is leadership by example, there is leadership by motivation, and we are talking about inspired leadership. Can you force leadership? Can you force people to be inspirational? How does inspirational leadership come about?
I think it's an evocative process. It's pulling, it's not pushing. It's discovering what's already there. It's not infusing the idea that we're going to make you a leader. Is a colonial idea. And so my own thought is there's a capacity for leadership. At the moment of birth, the first scream out of the womb is an act of leadership. It's probably a complaint. And so the idea that we're going to find or mold or shape leadership, to me, is about management and control, where leadership is something that has to be evoked. And I think the community brings out leadership in us. It's not the job of a mentor or a boss even.
You know, Anil, you've been working a lot in this field. Leadership, is it being taught? Can it be taught? Should it be taught? School of Inspired Leadership that you're leading right now, how do you teach leadership?
Yes, it all begins with the vision which we have is to build character, competence and enthusiasm. I'd like to explain these. Character is really something which is developed early in your life, but it is reinforced over time. I hear young people telling me that we studied in a good school, our parents taught us some values, but when we enter the world of business, we find the values are not practiced in the same way. We have a responsibility. Higher education needs to reinforce the right values. Secondly, competence. We must know what we are good at. If there's one thing we want to do in the school is to remind every student of the gift that student has and what the student needs to do with it. When the student understands what her own purpose is, understands what the person's gifts are, and learns how to leverage the gifts towards the purpose, the student becomes an inspired leader, and that's the endeavor in this whole year. Enabling others to do so is enabling others to be inspired leaders. And that's the collective endeavor of this community that we have created.
At the end of the day, leadership in the corporate world is about chasing profits. Isn't there a fundamental disconnect there, Mr. Muthuraman?
Leadership in the corporate world is not about chasing profits. Unfortunately, the world just now, in my view, is using wrong metrics if you use, people will always behave on the basis of how they get measured. If you measure a company on the basis of profits alone, that company will chase profits. That is not going to be a sustainable company over a long periods of time.
But the responsibility that an industrial organization has is to its shareholders, to its institutional shareholders, its promoters, its consumers, as well as its employees. Now, often these responsibilities and the pressures of these responsibilities take the focus away from the larger goal of what the society needs.
Yeah, but we must appreciate, you can always, you need to set your rules also. While there is a pressure from the external world of listening only to their shareholders, we must understand that society is a shareholder in every enterprise. If you look at a longer time frame of 1,000 years or so, you will find enough justification as to why the society which has not put direct money into a company are actually shareholders of the company. And a management of the company and a leadership of the company needs to take cognizance of that. And that is what I call as the enlightened leadership.
But do you find this issue of enlightened leadership missing not just in India but across the world? Look at the kind of lack of faith people have in big companies now, or the corporate world.
Well, I think the crisis we have is not a financial crisis. I think it's a crisis, you could say, in leadership, or a crisis in purpose. It's a crisis in the consumer society is unsustainable. I think India is becoming more like the West, but the West is the leader and the inventor of a consumer short-term society. The other thing I want to say is that it's a crisis in the narrative about what a business is. And your questions are an expression of that. The old narrative of business is only about business. It's only about profits. And that's not working. I mean, you say, short-term, bottom line, how's it going? It's not going well. And I think the idea that we may be out of the recession, but the crisis isn't over. And the crisis is the storyline we have about what a business is. It doesn't work. We have a narrative about what a business is. Short-term, bottom line, stakeholders, even customers, and at the cost of outsourcing our concern for the society. That narrative is what's in crisis. And I think businesses that realize that short-term is not a good story about who we are, that the instantness which you talked about earlier, and I think the media hasn't caught up with the new narrative.
I want to bring in Anil over here. How do you ensure that not just the organizations, Anil, but also the people working for that organization have a larger vision?
We started researching on which are the top companies in India to work for 6 years back. And we did this research covering thousands of companies, and I want to share one insight with you. The companies that were more altruistic, who were focused on the larger good of society, had higher trust levels in the companies. The people there took great pride in their work. They enjoyed the peer group that they worked with, and therefore they became companies which outperformed others. This doing more good makes you feel good about yourself. Employees look forward to working in these companies, and this is based on research in India, not some study in North America.
Mr. Muthuraman, why is it that the discussion we are having, and Tata Group is a shining example, but why is it that your group is still in a minority in the Indian corporate landscape? Why is it that it's only the Tata Group which is the beacon of altruistic company which looks beyond immediate profits, which looks at the country and the society at large? Why aren't more companies behaving like your company and your group does?
No, I do believe that more and more companies are beginning to realize that there is a wholesomeness of purpose that is required for companies. It just happens that Tata Group, which was founded 150 years ago, started off with a very clear vision. And that vision is the fundamental purpose of an industrial enterprise is to improve the quality of life of people around. And to do that fundamental purpose well, you must run your industrial enterprises well and profitably so that part of the profit can go back to the society. And it is the leadership that has sustained that vision all these 150 years. So for any long-term focus and for any wholesomeness of purpose of an industrial corporation, leadership is important.